So I was watching a video by the Amazing Atheist where he talks about a letter that some fan or not fan, some religious person sent him. Apparently, he has his PO box on his channel or something, so people can send him mail, and he'll oftentimes receive letters from religious people of all religions. Usually hating on him or positing some sort of argument that is flawed, and he likes to discuss these. Or if they're too flawed, he just throws it away. But, in this particular video, he was going over a letter he got from a Christian woman named with the alias Cat. I don't know if it's for Catherine or if she just likes cats or what the fuck ever. I don't even know. It doesn't matter. But basically, this was a little bit of a different letter because this letter wasn't about the existence of God. It had nothing to do with the basis of if God exists or not. It had to do with the nature of God, because there are, as TJ describes in the video, two completely different arguments here. There's the argument of, does God exist? And there's the argument of, what is God's nature? Is God a good God or a bad God if he exists? Because you can do that for fictional characters anyway. Like I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any gods, especially the Christian God. But I can still talk about the nature of God without hinting at the idea that I believe in him. I can argue the nature of some fictional character like SpongeBob with someone, even though I know SpongeBob does not exist. Well, I can't say that for a fact because logic tells me otherwise, but I can basically say SpongeBob does not exist in the real world, but I can still argue over the character of SpongeBob, and therefore that applies to a god. I can argue over the nature of a god, even though I don't believe in him or it or her or whatever. So this argument this letter was more on the basis of the nature of God instead of the existence. So you have to remember that the part I'm talking about is only the very beginning of the letter, but I want to bring it up because it stuck with me. I really wanted to address this because I felt like it was a pretty big opportunity to discuss this, but TJ missed it, which isn't bad. I mean, he did a good job tearing the letter apart, but that's beside the point. So the letter starts off by this lady basically stating that God is a God of justice. His nature is of justice. Therefore, sorry, this sounds really bad, but I need to start over. So TJ was she was responding to a part where TJ was talking about how if God is a loving God, how can he send anyone to hell? Which is, a good question, but the response was, God is a God of justice. Therefore, his nature is justice, so he needs to punish those that deserve to be punished. And if he were to let, for example, an atheist into heaven who doesn't supposedly deserve to be there, which is kind of weird because it's just a lack of belief, but whatever. If God let an atheist into heaven, then he would lose his abilities as God. He would lose his title, his rank as God, because he wasn't following this justice that is supposedly his nature. That was her argument defending the nature of God when it comes to sending people to hell. But it just raises more questions. You see, when I heard that, my first question, the literal first question that came to my mind was this. That's a limitation. So what created or what set that limitation on God? God is supposedly eternal based on what I'm told by Christians. He's eternal, so he's always existed. He wasn't created by something else. So what or who posed these limitations on God? If God posed these limitations on himself, then he is still evil, because he posed these limitations on himself knowing full well if he's omniscient, he knows full well what's going to happen. So he knows that if he puts these limitations on himself, he's going to send these people he supposedly loves to hell. That is not a loving God. Therefore, it's problematic. So your argument falls on itself there. If these limitations came from some other source, like let's say God was created, well, then we'd have a whole nother story of, okay, well, then what created that thing that created God? What created that thing that created that thing that created God? And so on and so forth. Basically, it's almost the fallacy of passing the buck in a different sense, which is, I didn't picture it coming up in the argument of the character of God. And then finally, it raised a major question that the person who wrote the letter hinted at but refused to respond to. She said, well, this may point towards a lack of omnipotence, but it really doesn't, but I'm not going to go into that here, maybe another time. That's literally what she said in the fucking letter. Well, that very much so hints at omnipotence. Omnipotence means all-powerful. You have all the power in the world. You can do anything. Omnipotence means that you have no limitations. That is the actual factual definition, is there's nothing you can't do. That's what omnipotence is. All-powerful. So how can something with limitations be all-powerful? How can something that's all-powerful have limitations? That doesn't make sense. That's a huge flaw in your argument there. Now, I would argue on the side of TJ that God is a very evil and unjust God. If I was shown evidence that God exists, I would believe, but I would not worship him. He is evil, assuming it's the more literal interpretation. I mean, there's no reason to believe that any of the more moderate interpretations are right. Like, how do you know what to take and what not to take, literally? So that's a little bit of a toss-up there. But I would not worship him. He's evil. But just all these arguments make it seem so questionable about the nature and existence of him. I mean, this is supposed to be a question about nature, and it makes the question shift to existence, because it doesn't seem like an existence is possible with these parameters, these limitations. He's not a God. He's not omnipotent. He's not omniscient. He's not all-powerful if he has these limitations on him. So he's not actually a God. So your original claim that, oh, well, he would lose his God power if he... That sounds weird. He would lose his God power if he let someone into into heaven unjustly. Well, it turns out he doesn't have that God power to begin with. Part of being a God is being all powerful, and he has these supposed limitations on him. And so the only other side to this argument would be, well, whoever's writing this letter, Kat, is wrong, and the reason God sends people to hell is simply for justice. He does not want to send people who don't deserve it to heaven. He wants to send these people who he supposedly loves to hell, and that's supposedly a just punishment. What? Okay, that doesn't make sense to me, but I guess that could be, posed in as an argument of incredulity. That doesn't mean it's not true, but that does mean that God is evil. Evil, well, in our current subjective moral standards, God is evil, and it's a perfectly valid argument to make. He does horrible things. He sends horrible people to hell. He sends people to hell, which is horrible. And based on what should be taken as a literal interpretation, I would be going to hell simply because I don't believe in him. But I'm a good person, for the most part. I'm better than a lot of people who'd be supposedly going to heaven. And yet the entire reason why I'm going to hell is simply because I lack an existence of something that has never proved itself, never shown the slightest shred of evidence. In fact, shown evidence of the opposite. And I'm supposed to believe that on face value with the skeptical mind that I was given at birth. So that doesn't make sense to me. That is an evil God, in my opinion. But that's just my response to this Cat, to this one portion of the letter. I would suggest looking up TJ's video, The Amazing Atheist. He has a great channel. He posts some good content. But yeah, God is evil and not omnipotent, apparently.